in the city of Chicago. This man has been nothing but corrupt since the moment he came into office, and he's gonna walk off with millions.
When federal agents raided cartel operations across America, they never expected the trail to lead to Chicago's mayor. Turns out, the mayor had been in bed with the cartels, collecting bribes and luxury gifts. But that's just the beginning. What the DEA found next will blow your mind. The shocking discovery. In the shadowy corridors of Chicago's City Hall, where power brokers have wheeled and dealed for over a century, something unprecedented is happening. The Drug Enforcement Administration, in what can only be described as the most comprehensive anti-cartel operation in recent memory, has uncovered a web of connections that reaches from the blood-soaked streets of Sinaloa, Mexico, all the way to the 5th floor of Chicago's municipal headquarters. The story begins on a sweltering August morning in 2025, when over 2,000 federal agents launched what would become known as Operation Midway Blitz, named after both the pivotal World War II battle and Chicago's Midway Airport. This massive federal intervention would expose connections that nobody saw coming, connections that would make even the most cynical Chicago political observers gasp in disbelief. But to understand how we got here, we need to rewind to May 2023, when Brandon Johnson, a former Chicago Teachers Union organizer and Cook County commissioner, rode a wave of progressive enthusiasm into the mayor's office. Johnson promised transformative change, equity, and a break from Chicago's notorious machine politics. He spoke eloquently about investing in education, reimagining public safety, and creating a more equitable city for all residents. What nobody anticipated was how his progressive agenda would create collision courses with federal law enforcement that would ultimately expose Chicago's role as America's primary drug trafficking hub. The first domino fell on August 25, 2025, when the DEA launched its unprecedented 23-state surge against the Sinaloa cartel. This wasn't your typical drug bust. This was a coordinated assault on what federal investigators had designated as a foreign terrorist organization, giving federal agents military-style tools and enhanced penalties to dismantle the organization. The scope of this nationwide operation was unprecedented, involving multiple agencies and resulting in hundreds of arrests.
The Drug Enforcement Administration announced Monday that from August 25th to 29th, agents arrested 617 people linked to the cartel across 23 U.S. field divisions. The operation, called a DEA surge, also seized a large haul of drugs, firearms, and cash.
In just 5 days, agents arrested 617 individuals and seized enough fentanyl to kill 249 million people. But Chicago wasn't just another stop on this nationwide sweep. It was the crown jewel, the central nervous system of the cartel's entire American operation. According to the DEA's official press release, Chicago has been explicitly identified as the Midwest epicenter for the Sinaloa cartel's fentanyl and methamphetamine distribution. This isn't hyperbole or political rhetoric. This is the cold, hard assessment of federal investigators who have spent years mapping the cartel's operations. The numbers are staggering. The cartel controls an estimated 80 to 90% of Chicago's fentanyl and methamphetamine supply, generating over $50 million annually through their Chicago operations alone. Chicago's strategic importance to drug cartels cannot be overstated. The city's unique geographical position and infrastructure make it an ideal distribution point for illegal narcotics flowing into the American heartland.
You know, the twins, it was, like I've told you guys in the past, Chicago is a hub. There's many ways of, once it gets there, to distribute to other cities.
To put this in perspective, Chicago's infrastructure, O'Hare International Airport, its extensive rail networks, and major interstates like I-94 and I-55 has been transformed into the cartel's personal logistics system. Federal investigators have documented how fentanyl precursors enter through the port of Chicago, hidden in legitimate shipments like avocado crates from Michoacan. Local labs in abandoned South Side buildings then press these precursors into counterfeit pills that mimic legitimate OxyContin, while methamphetamine super labs in Indiana feed crystal meth back into the city's distribution network. But here's where the story takes a disturbing turn towards City Hall. In a move that would prove to be incredibly controversial, Mayor Johnson's August 30th, 2025, Protecting Chicago executive order prohibited the Chicago Police Department from collaborating with federal agencies like the DEA and ICE on immigration enforcement or joint patrols. The order mandated that federal agents must wear body cameras, display badges, and obtain warrants for arrests within city limits, requirements that federal agents argue have significantly hampered their ability to gather intelligence and make arrests.
This order affirms that the Chicago Police Department will not collaborate with military personnel on police patrols or civil immigration enforcement. We will not have our police officers who are working hard every single day to drive down crime deputized to do traffic stops and checkpoints for the president.
Alderman Raymond Lopez and other critics argue that this executive order essentially shields cartel-linked undocumented operatives, allowing them to evade capture at crucial moments in ongoing investigations. Federal sources, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that several high-value arrests during the DEA sweep were delayed by days due to these local restrictions, potentially allowing other cartel members to destroy evidence or flee the jurisdiction. The timing of Johnson's executive order is particularly significant. It came just days before Operation Midway Blitz was launched on September 8, 2025, deploying over 2,000 federal agents to target what DHS called criminal illegal aliens with prior convictions for serious offenses. What makes this situation even more complex is the emergence of another player in Chicago's criminal landscape, Tren de Aragua, a Venezuelan transnational criminal organization that has been designated as a foreign terrorist organization alongside the Sinaloa cartel. This group has been linked to a December 2024 mass shooting in Chicago's Gage Park, where 3 people were killed and several wounded at a house party. What sets Tren de Aragua apart from other criminal organizations is their unprecedented level of violence and their willingness to directly confront law enforcement.
And the level of their violence, especially with extortion and assaults, is a lot higher than some of these other gangs has been as well. A lot of these gangs try to stay under the radar from law enforcement.
But perhaps most damaging to Mayor Johnson's credibility is what federal investigators discovered wasn't just happening on Chicago's streets. It was happening inside City Hall itself. A January 29, 2025 report from Chicago's Office of Inspector General accused Johnson's office of violating the city's ethics ordinance by accepting and failing to report high-value gifts from unknown sources stored in a secretive gift room at City Hall. The investigation into these ethics violations required extraordinary measures by investigators to uncover the truth.
A new watchdog report revealing Mayor Johnson has gotten some expensive gifts while in office.
But investigators say they had to go undercover to find out what they were. Political reporter Paris Schutz joins us with more on this developing story.
The items discovered included premium whiskey bottles valued at over $200 each, Gucci handbags worth $1,500 or more, Hugo Boss cufflinks worth $300, designer shoes, jewelry, and a personalized Mont Blanc pen worth $400. The OIG estimated the unreported gifts totaled thousands of dollars, raising serious questions about potential pay-to-play arrangements with city contractors and vendors. What makes this scandal even more explosive is that many of these gifts allegedly came from donors with city contracts, creating the very real possibility that Mayor Johnson's gift closet was being stocked by the same networks that federal investigators believe are connected to cartel money laundering operations through Chicago businesses like car washes, nail salons, and restaurants. This convergence of federal drug enforcement, organized crime infiltration, and local government corruption creates a perfect storm that threatens to engulf not just Mayor Johnson's administration, but the very foundation of public safety in America's 3rd largest city. As you'll soon see, the web of connections runs even deeper than anyone imagined. The cartel's stranglehold, how Chicago became America's drug capital. To understand the true scope of what federal investigators uncovered in their sweeping operations across Chicago, we need to dive deep into the intricate web that the Sinaloa cartel has spent decades weaving throughout the city. What emerges is a picture so shocking, so comprehensive in its reach, that it challenges everything we thought we knew about organized crime in America. The Sinaloa cartel's relationship with Chicago isn't new. It's been building for over 2 decades. But what federal investigators discovered in 2025 revealed that the cartel's grip on the city had evolved into something far more sophisticated and dangerous than anyone had previously understood. According to the 2025 National Drug Threat Assessment, the cartel now controls an estimated 80 to 90% of Chicago's fentanyl and methamphetamine supply, operating what can only be described as a parallel economy within the city. The power dynamics within Chicago's drug trade have shifted dramatically in recent years, with different cartels vying for control of the lucrative market. Former cartel operatives and street-level dealers paint a picture of a city where territorial control has become increasingly fragmented.
So pretty much what I'm trying to say is that yes, the Sinaloa cartel has lost a lot of ground in Chicago, but the Jalisco Nueva Generación cartel has picked up, the slack.
The scale of the operation is breathtaking. Federal investigators documented how the cartel generates over $50 million annually through their Chicago operations alone. But the real revelation came when they mapped out exactly how this money flows through the city's economy. Car washes, nail salons, restaurants, and other seemingly legitimate businesses serve as front operations for laundering cartel profits, creating a shadow economy that touches virtually every neighborhood in the city. The cartel's logistics network reads like a masterclass in criminal enterprise. Fentanyl precursors from China and India enter Mexico through the port of Manzanillo, a port that, disturbingly, is operated by a Chinese company. These precursors are then shipped north, where federal investigators have documented that approximately 2,000 Chinese chemists work in cartel labs, transforming these raw materials into the deadly cocktail of fentanyl that's killing Americans by the thousands. The Chinese connection to America's fentanyl crisis represents a strategic operation designed to weaken the United States.
The precursor chemicals, as about everybody now knows, come from China, but they're offloaded at the port of Manzanillo in Mexico, which is run by a Chinese company. Those precursors are shipped up north, where the DEA says 2,000 Chinese chemists happen to be who turn this into the deadly cocktail of fentanyl.
But Chicago's role in this network goes far beyond simply being a destination. The city serves as the cartel's primary distribution hub for the entire Midwest, with drugs flowing in through O'Hare Airport, hidden in legitimate cargo shipments, trucked in via interstate highways, and even arriving by rail. Once in Chicago, the cartel leverages the city's extensive gang networks to distribute drugs street level throughout the region. The human cost of this operation is staggering. Chicago's 2025 overdose deaths exceed 1,200, representing a 34% increase from 2024, with fentanyl present in 90% of these cases. Meanwhile, drug offenses in the city have surged 34%, with over 3,800 incidents recorded year to date, and projections suggesting this number could reach 5,200 by year's end. What makes the cartel's Chicago operations particularly insidious is their relationship with local gangs. Federal investigators have documented collaborations with over 100 local gangs representing more than 117,000 members citywide. The Gangster Disciples, with over 40,000 members, control much of the South Side distribution, while the Vice Lords, with 30,000+ members, dominate the West Side. These aren't casual business relationships. They're sophisticated partnerships that have transformed Chicago's gang landscape. Recent federal operations have revealed the staggering scope of cartel operations in the Pacific Northwest, giving us insight into the scale of their nationwide network. The quantities of drugs seized in just single operations demonstrate the industrial scale of these criminal enterprises.
This Sinaloa cartel affiliated group trafficked an extremely large quantity of drugs. In this case, we seized 484 pounds of methamphetamine, 30 pounds of cocaine, 8 pounds of heroin, over 217,000 fentanyl pills, and 197,000 pounds of powder fentanyl.
The September 5th, 2025, federal indictment of a high-ranking Sinaloa faction leader provides perhaps the clearest picture yet of how these operations work. The indicted leader, described as operating from Culiacan, Mexico, coordinated with Chicago-based operatives, including leaders from the Gangster Disciples and Vice Lords. The operation involved 10 tons of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine trafficked into Chicago from 2023 to 2025, including 500 kilograms of fentanyl, enough for 250 million lethal doses. But perhaps most disturbing is how this criminal enterprise has been able to operate with what can only be described as impunity under Mayor Johnson's administration. While the mayor himself may not be directly involved in cartel operations, his policies have created an environment where cartel operatives can move freely throughout the city. The mayor's August 30th, 2025 executive order has created what federal agents describe as operational barriers that have allowed cartel members to evade capture. During the massive August DEA sweep, several high-value targets were able to escape or destroy evidence because local police were prohibited from sharing intelligence with federal agents in real time. This pattern of evasion extends to Johnson's personal conduct, particularly regarding the expensive gifts he's received while in office. When confronted about these gifts during congressional testimony, Johnson's responses revealed a troubling pattern of deflection and denial.
On June 12, 2023, you received Hugo Boss cufflinks and a personalized Mont Blanc pin. Do you know who gave you those?
So I did not receive those personally. The city of Chicago
You received those
them.
on
This isn't just a theoretical concern. Federal sources have documented specific instances where cartel-linked individuals were released by local authorities despite federal detainer requests, only to disappear back into the city's criminal underground. In one case, documented by ICE, a Sinaloa-linked dealer avoided detention due to local non-cooperation policies, allowing him to continue operations for months before finally being apprehended. The convergence of these factors, cartel infiltration, gang collaboration, and local policies that hinder federal enforcement, has created what drug enforcement experts describe as a perfect storm for organized crime. Adding to this volatile mix is the presence of Tren de Aragua, the Venezuelan gang that federal investigators now believe is attempting to establish its own foothold in Chicago's criminal economy. Tren de Aragua's presence in Chicago represents a new and potentially more dangerous element in the city's criminal landscape. Unlike traditional gangs that try to maintain a low profile, Tren de Aragua operates with brazen disregard for law enforcement. Federal sources report that the gang's leadership has actually issued a green light on police officers, authorizing gang members to attack law enforcement, something that even established cartels typically avoid. The December 2024 Gage Park mass shooting linked to Tren de Aragua members serves as a chilling preview of what experts fear could become routine if these criminal organizations continue to operate unchecked. 3 people were killed and several wounded in what investigators describe as a territorial dispute over drug sales territory. But the most shocking revelation may be the sheer scope of money involved in these operations. Federal investigators estimate that cartel-related money laundering in Chicago involves hundreds of millions of dollars annually, flowing through legitimate businesses that serve as fronts for criminal enterprises. When you consider that Chicago has spent over $600 million on migrant aid while facing a nearly billion-dollar budget deficit, questions arise about whether some of these funds may have inadvertently facilitated the very criminal networks now terrorizing the city. City council members have been vocal about the financial mismanagement, particularly regarding the massive expenditures on migrant services, while the city faces unprecedented budget shortfalls.
Why would we spend over $600 million on migrants when you know we have a deficit like?
And all this time, the entire time, think about this. This is the important part.
As federal operations continue to dismantle cartel networks piece by piece, a clearer picture emerges of how deeply these criminal organizations have penetrated not just Chicago's streets, but its very institutions. The question now facing the city is whether local leadership will cooperate with federal efforts to root out this criminal infiltration, or continue to prioritize ideological positions over public safety. The reckoning, federal intervention, and the future of Chicago. As federal agents prepared for what would become the largest coordinated law enforcement operation in Chicago's recent history, Mayor Brandon Johnson was busy crafting what he believed would be his political salvation. Instead, his actions would trigger a constitutional crisis that would expose just how deeply criminal organizations had penetrated not only Chicago's streets, but potentially its very government. The collision between federal law enforcement and local politics reached its breaking point on August 30th, 2025, when Mayor Johnson signed his Protecting Chicago executive order just days before federal agents were set to launch their massive anti-cartel operation. The timing wasn't coincidental. It was calculated defiance that would have far-reaching consequences. When Mayor Johnson announced this controversial executive order, he framed it as a defensive measure against federal overreach.
Let me start by saying this. I do not take this executive action lightly. I would have preferred to work in a more collaborative approach. I would have preferred to do the work with our allies in City Council to pass legislation, ultimately.
What Johnson presented as protection for Chicago's residents, federal investigators saw as obstruction of justice on a massive scale. DHS Secretary Kristi Noem didn't mince words, stating that depraved criminal illegal aliens in Illinois can no longer hide under the protection of sanctuary state governor Pritzker. But the real target of her criticism was clear. Mayor Johnson's administration had created a safe haven for criminal organization. The executive order prohibited Chicago police from collaborating with federal agencies like the DEA and ICE, required federal agents to wear body cameras and display badges, and mandated that all federal enforcement operations be conducted with warrants. On the surface, these might seem like reasonable civil rights protections. In practice, they created operational barriers that allowed cartel members and gang affiliates to evade capture during critical moments of federal investigations. Federal sources revealed that during the massive August DEA sweep, several high-value targets escaped capture specifically because local authorities were prohibited from sharing real-time intelligence with federal agents. The human cost of these policies became tragically clear when examining cases like the December 2024 Gage Park mass shooting. Two Venezuelan nationals linked to Tren de Aragua, Ricardo Granadillo Padilla and Edward Martinez Cermeno, were eventually arrested by ICE in February and May 2025, but only after they had fled Chicago and were apprehended in other states. Had local authorities cooperated with federal agencies, these suspects might have been detained before they could escape the city. Meanwhile, the federal government's pursuit of cartel leaders reached a historic milestone with the capture and prosecution of some of the most wanted drug traffickers in the world. The conviction of major cartel figures represents a significant victory for American law enforcement.
El Mayo will spend the rest of his life behind bars. He will die in a U.S. federal prison where he belongs. His guilty plea brings us one step closer to achieving our goal.
Meanwhile, Johnson's personal scandals continued to mount, creating a devastating portrait of a mayor more concerned with personal enrichment than public safety. The Inspector General's report on his secret gift closet revealed a pattern of behavior that raised serious questions about his fitness for office. When federal investigators discovered that many of these undisclosed gifts came from sources with city contract, the implications became even more sinister. When confronted about these expensive gifts, Johnson's explanations seemed to minimize their significance and deflect responsibility.
It's a mischaracterization of what's being reported. These are gifts to the city. They're logged. I'll make sure that our Office of Communications gets back with you so that you can, and anyone else who wants to access.
The gifts weren't just expensive baubles, they represented a systematic pattern of what federal investigators now believe may have been influence peddling on a massive scale. Premium whiskey, Gucci handbags, Hugo Boss cufflinks, and designer shoes worth thousands of dollars, all from unknown sources, according to the mayor's office. But federal investigators weren't buying Johnson's explanations. The mayor's inability or unwillingness to identify the sources of these expensive gifts raised immediate red flags for federal investigators who were simultaneously tracking cartel money laundering operations through Chicago businesses. The possibility that some of these gifts might have originated from the same criminal networks they were investigating couldn't be ignored. But it wasn't just the gifts that concerned federal authorities. It was Johnson's broader pattern of financial mismanagement that seemed to create opportunities for criminal exploitation. Chicago has spent over $600 million on migrant aid while facing a nearly billion-dollar budget deficit, much of it funneled through private contractors in deals lacking transparency. City aldermen have become increasingly vocal about the fiscal mismanagement they've witnessed under the Johnson administration, with some making startling revelations about the true cost of the mayor's spending priorities.
However, if we had not spent $600 million on the migrants, we wouldn't have a deficit this year going forward. And so we have created this disaster that we're in, and now we want to point fingers and blame everybody else for the bad decisions that this administration has been making.
Alderman Anthony Beale, representing the 9th Ward, didn't mince words about the administration's fiscal irresponsibility. His public criticism of the mayor's spending priorities highlighted what many saw as a fundamental disconnect between Johnson's stated commitment to public safety and his actual policy decisions. Federal investigators were particularly interested in the opacity surrounding migrant aid contracts. A June 2024 lawsuit revealed lease deals guaranteeing $150,000 per month per building to shelter operators, with some property owners earning $1.80 million annually from single sites. The lack of competitive bidding and the absence of detailed public records raised questions about whether these contracts represented legitimate humanitarian aid or something more sinister. The federal response to Johnson's obstruction was swift and overwhelming. Operation Midway Blitz deployed over 2,000 federal agents to Chicago, effectively overriding local sanctuary policies through federal authority. The operation targeted what DHS called criminal illegal aliens with prior convictions for serious offenses, but its broader message was clear. Federal law enforcement would not be deterred by local political resistance. The federal commitment to dismantling these criminal networks represents the highest levels of government dedication to protecting American communities from the scourge of cartel violence and drug trafficking.
DEA Administrator Terrence Cole said the results show the full weight of the agency's commitment to protecting Americans. He added that every kilo seized, every dollar stripped from the cartels, and every arrest represents lives saved and communities defended.
The results spoke for themselves. Within the first few days of Operation Midway Blitz, federal agents had arrested over a dozen individuals with serious criminal histories who had been released by local authorities despite federal detainer requests. These weren't immigration violations. These were violent criminals who had been able to continue operating because of local policies that prioritized ideology over public safety. Meanwhile, the massive DEA surge against the Sinaloa cartel continued to yield unprecedented results. Over 617 arrests across 23 states, seizures of 480 kilograms of fentanyl powder, and over 714,000 counterfeit pills, 420 firearms, and $11 million in cash. But perhaps most significantly, the operation disrupted an estimated $20 million in monthly cartel revenue flowing through Chicago. The designation of cartels as foreign terrorist organizations fundamentally changed the legal landscape. Federal agents now had enhanced tools and penalties at their disposal, while local sanctuary policies became irrelevant when dealing with individuals designated as terrorists. This shift represented a seismic change in how the federal government approached organized crime in sanctuary cities. Federal prosecutors have made it clear that these criminal organizations will be treated with the full force of anti-terrorism laws. As this investigation concludes, the picture that emerges is one of a city at a crossroads. Mayor Johnson's administration, weakened by scandal and facing a nearly billion-dollar budget deficit, finds itself increasingly isolated as federal authorities assert control over criminal investigations. His approval rating has plummeted to around 20 to 25%, making him one of the least popular mayors in Chicago's history. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed watching this video, click on one of the boxes playing on your screen to watch more similar content.